been waiting for. The biggest, most colossal, gigantic, fantastic Elton John.
Sir Elton Hercules John, flamboyant piano man, campaigner, collector, and a national treasure. Possibly the most successful male solo artist of all time, he's squeezed a lot into his 63 years. But this is the story of the Elton we sometimes forget, the singer-songwriter who quietly emerged onto the music scene exactly 40 years ago. To the bemusement of his songwriting partner Bernie Taupin, he shot to fame in America and in a few crazy years became the biggest pop star on the planet.
It is kind of tragic in a way that when you ask the general public the question Elton John and they think of, you know, Big Glasses and The Lion King and Crocodile Rock, it's all quite wrong, really.
But now Elton's heading in a new direction, and that's back to where it all began.
To go forward in my career as a recording artist, I've got to go back. I've got to revisit what I did. And that's where my heart was. In the soulful, joyful country, gospel, funky, rock and roll, the element of the South, that's where I am. That's my true spirit.
Saturday, 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 that's all right.
Funereal from Harrow draws the train. On, northwestwards, London far away, and stations start to look quite countrified. Pinner, a parish of 1,000 souls, till railways gave it many thousands more.
Growing up the only child of a troubled marriage in post-war Pinner, young Reg Dwight used music as a way of escape from his solitary life.
I used to find solace in music when my parents, you know, used to argue. I used to go in my room and listen to Radio Luxembourg, and radio filled my head with dreams. I had a few friends. I had my cousins and stuff like that, but music was my best friend, and I lived and breathed for it. I grew up playing by ear at a very early age. I could pick up any tune and play it. And when I started playing the piano by ear, it was Winifred Atwell and people like that. My parents, thankfully, asked me to have lessons when I was 7, and I did, and I won a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music.
11-year-old Reg joined the Academy's Junior Exhibitionist scheme for state school children who showed an exceptional gift for music.
Well, it's funny that I've had hundreds of pupils, and yet I remember him so clearly. He was a dear. I was very fond of him. He had such a marvellous ear, but I do remember that he couldn't read music. So I gave him these books of studies to catch up on being a pianist. Also, at the Academy, he learned how to construct music. He learned about the chords and phrases and how different composers constructed their music and everything that would help him if he wanted to write his own music.
But by the late 50s, British teenagers had other ideas of how to tinkle the ivories.
Rock and roll arrived and changed the world, which it did. It changed my world.
Come on over, baby. We got chicken in the barn. Who's the barn? What the barn? My barn.
Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Ray Charles, Fats Domino came into play, and so it was a whole new ballgame.
He's breaking. Whole lot of shaking going on.
He hadn't been showing such enthusiasm for the last year, I should say. I didn't know that he'd formed his own band and that he had his quite different love of music from mine.
I formed a band at 15 called Bluesology with a couple of friends. Still didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wouldn't be a classical pianist. I didn't want to be a classical pianist. At that point, I just wanted to be in a band and play rock and roll.
We're gonna
Bluesology were a collection of like-minded lads from the Pinner and Northwood Hills area of northwest London.
Reg was square compared with the other people that were in our band. Very short hair, little round glasses. He didn't look the part at all. We didn't see a great deal of him sort of socially, but directly he got down and played. Everything else was just put aside. He obviously had an immense talent.
He could do anything. He could sit down with a stack of music and work his way through it. He could play rock and roll, boogie woogie, jazz, you name it. We couldn't have done what we did without him, really. Because of his musical knowledge, he was the person to knit it all together, I think.
I always got the impression that he wanted to progress his career, probably more than other members of the band, and this was just a stepping stone.
By the age of 17, young Reg was set on his path as a musician, and school had become something of a distraction.
My headmaster at Pinner County was Mr. Westgate Smith. I was petrified of him. And I knocked on his door and I told him the story of why I wanted to leave. And he said, well, I know how much music means to you. He said, I give you my blessing. He said, but make sure you work hard at everything you do.
Taking the lead, Reg set to work writing Bluesology's first single.
I wasn't the lead singer, but they didn't like the lead singer's voice, so I had to sing them, which you can imagine went down very well with the lead singer.
Come back, baby. Come back to me, yeah.
Now armed with their first 7-inch, the band's next step on the road to turning pro was to pay their dues, backing R&B acts for the infamous Roy Tempest agency.
Tempest had hit on the wonderful idea of importing acts into the UK whose careers were a little bit on the downward slope because you could get them cheap. And by the time they got here, they were in for 2 weeks of solid, hard work.
I give you all I have, baby. Up when you leave my arms, I know.
These gigs turned out to be a masterclass in stagecraft from the seasoned veterans.
Patti LaBelle, Billy Stewart, Major Lance, the Ink Spots. They were all great to him. Major Lance, Billy Stewart, who's one of the greatest underrated R&B stars of all time. An enormous, big man. The way he carried himself and the way he sang, his mic, in his Summertime. Summertime, he was fantastic.
Summertime, and the living is easy.
It was that era of R&B where they all did the movements and and they knew how to do a show, whether it was 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, 10 minutes. They knew how to get the audience. Those kind of people you just watched. Nothing's better for you than to go out and play live, even if it's to 20 people, because it gives you resolve, it hardens you up, and it makes you a better songwriter. It gives you the experience, the backbone.
Having made a name for themselves as a backing band, Bluesology's next gig came from a little closer to home.
We joined Long John Baldry. John was a blues singer, so we were doing Della Reese, Nina Simone songs. Great. Fantastic.
We're talking about Mr. Long John Baldry. He was pretty well established on the blues scene anyway, Baldry, actually. And then subsequently he had a big #1 hit in 1967, this dreadful toe-curling record. God, let the heartaches begin.
So
Consequently, our dates changed. We were playing in supper clubs, and it was cabaret. And I was playing, I was getting more and more depressed. And I thought, this isn't the reason I wanted to play in a band. I hate this.
One time we were playing at this club in London, and Reg got so hacked off with it. We're in the middle of this song, and all of a sudden, you can hear this racket going on at the back of the stage. And I turn around and it's him just completely lost his bottle, tipped the organ up, he's fuming around, I've had enough, you know. And Baldry's still trying to sing, let the heartaches begin, you know. It was time to go then, yeah.
If I don't go, I'm going to be stuck here or work in a record shop, you know. There's no future. There's no future in this. There's no future whatsoever. So I answered that infamous advert of Liberty Records in the NME, wanting talent and songwriters.
Another response to the Talent Wanted ad came from a lonesome poet from Lincolnshire with aspirations of making it as a songwriter.
If you're traveling in the North Country Fair.
Bernie came down from Lincolnshire and there was this very young boy with long hair, very attractive, big reader, huge Dylan fan. He got me into Dylan far more than I was before. And we started writing together, and it felt comfortable straight away. It was like a hand in a glove.
Love of mine.
I just remember that we were both very shy. You know, being an only child, I think, gave him a certain sort of way of being. And for me, you know, being a country kid in the big city, I was sort of out of my depth. So I think we were both sort of swimming in deep water and basically trying to find something to hang on to, and we found each other.
Bunking at Reggie's mum's house in Pinner, the new best friends settled into a daily routine, commuting from the suburbs to swinging Soho.
You know, Denmark Street, I mean, on any given day, you could see pretty much anybody going through there. So bands like the Kinks, the Stones, Donovan, they'd be doing their publishing deals and recording demos. So there was all this activity going on.
In contrast to this youthful scene, Reg and Bernie's destination was an apprenticeship in the old world music biz mecca known as Tin Pan Alley.
It's London's Tin Pan Alley, birthplace of melodies which have kept Britain singing in good times and in bad. Just 60 yards of plate glass windows.
The pair were fixed up with a job as staff writers at the Beatles' veteran song publisher Dick James Music.
It was a very old school environment. Dick was a hardline Jewish music businessman, and he ran an office that was a little bit old-fashioned in a way.
It was like the changing of the guard. You know, it was so funny because a lot of the guys that had these office cubicles within Dick James's office, they were like artifacts of the music hall days, you know. We'd hang out in the pubs and stuff like that and listen to all the old cronies talk about the good old days and have them sort of point fingers at us and say, you're not professionals, you know, you got to be around for a long time to be called a professional.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, a song for Europe. And tonight, song number 4, written by Bernie Taupin and Elton John. Lulu sings, I Can't Go On Living Without You.
I once said I could go on without your love. I would be strong, but things have changed in heavens above. I know that I need you.
Bernie and I, you know, we started off as songwriters that were supposed to write hits for other people, and we were terrible at it.
Reg and Bernie spent 2 fruitless years trying to churn out hits for pop stars like Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. They never quite got it right.
And Bernie and I had so many times where we felt like jacking it in, you know. We would come back on the train to Northwood Hills to my parents' flat, and we'd sit down with my mum and say, oh, you know, no one's covered our song, I think we'll chuck it in. Or she said, well, you're getting paid every week. She said, go work in the greengrocers then. It's like, what would you rather do?
Since their partnership began, Reg and Bernie had been recording demos of their own songs for Reg to one day perform himself.
Reg came into my office one day and said, we've more or less laid down an album, which we're looking to release it on the DJM label. I said to him, yeah, but you know, we can't put it out under the name Reg Dwight. That's, you know, not a very awe-inspiring name.
Simply combining the names of Long John Baldry and Elton Dean, the sax player in Bluesology, Reg came up with Elton John. Empty Sky was released in June 1969, but went largely unnoticed.
Empty Sky did have a proper release, and I'm sure review copies were sent around, but nobody paid any attention to it at all. And in sort of musical terms, it was really not much more than demos.
Reg's creation, Elton John, was still a work in progress.
He's not really Mark Bolan, is he? You know what I mean? That was my immediate thought. I thought, he's a bit short, he's a bit chubby, and I don't know whether he's got the wherewithal to be an artiste.
Taking all his musical experience, a batch of new and improved lyrics from Bernie, and the production team behind David Bowie's hit Space Oddity, Elton was about to seize his moment.
Elton told Gus and me explicitly and specifically, you have carte blanche, we want you to do your own thing.
Gus came in, met with my father and myself, and asked for quite a high budget. And having heard the songs, wanted to orchestrate them. We were looking at a very high budget, and we decided to take the gamble.
We were very careful to create a beautiful soundscape, knowing that it was going to sound really nice. Maybe lovely is a nice word.
Peering out of tiny eyes, the grubby hands that grip the rail, wipe the window clean of frost as the morning air laid on the latch.
It all went very smoothly. Dick James was overjoyed, and we just got more and more sort of excited as to the prospects of the success of this record.
Here was Elton John reborn as the profound singer-songwriter, complete with orchestral arrangements, heartfelt lyrics, and now the look to carry it all off.
Singer-songwriters at the time were fairly sort of moody characters, and Elton seemed like quite a shy little fellow when you met him, and Bernie's words were very much in the sort of singer-songwriter mould of the time, so that sort of suited him.
I was on that undercurrent. I hadn't had a chart success or anything like that, but I was on the verge.
We got some airplay. I don't remember it breaking into the top 30. And we, to be blunt, were struggling.
I have been deceived.
The Elton John album wasn't selling in Britain, so, desperate to secure any return on his investment, Dick James hawked the record to his contacts across the pond.
In the post comes this Elton John album. So I take it out, I listen, put it on my turntable, and I listen to this great album, and I said, thank you, God, this is incredible. It was one of the greatest pieces of music I'd ever heard in my life. So then I said, we have to bring him to America and, you know, break him here in America.
This enthusiasm from the Americans was enough to persuade Dick James to fund one last attempt to launch Elton by sending him and his band to LA.
Dick sent them over there, and it basically was sink or swim. This was it.
Touching down in Los Angeles was the stuff of dreams for Elton and Bernie, and a far cry from their shared bedroom in the London suburbs.
I was just interested in going because it was America, you know. I mean, I'd always wanted to come here. It was a dream, you know.
The band were met by a welcoming party intent on presenting Elton as someone who was already a star.
We were driving from the airport down the freeway, and then we got to the Sunset Strip, and it was like being on parade. It was just unbelievable, you know, the California sunshine and the pretty girls all over the place. It was amazing.
There was still a transition from the 60s going on. There was still the singer-songwriter era and Flower Power and that whole the Summer of Love and all that stuff. It started in LA. So he came into a very vibrant scene.
The US label men made sure the great and the good of LA's music scene were assembled for Elton's week-long stint at the Troubadour Club.
It was brilliant that Russ Regan, the head of Union Records, put him in this club rather than go to the Whiskey or someplace, see, because the rock acts were playing the Whiskey more or less. This was the Songwriters Club. This is where you sat every week and you saw Joni Mitchell, and you saw James Taylor, and you saw Tim Hardin, and you saw those guys. And so he was putting Elton John along in that company.
Senorita, play guitar, plays it just for you. My rosary has broken, my beads of all.
Elton fitted right in at the Troubadour, but had a lot more to offer thanks to his apprenticeship in rock and roll and rhythm and blues.
All of a sudden, he jumps up from the piano, he kicks the thing, and I go, see, you're always relating to things. This is Jerry Lee Lewis, that's what he's doing.
I was having a ball, and we rocked. Had a great three-piece band. And I came out and did 60 Years On, but it wasn't really like the record. It was more like an extended jam version.
He had terrific songs of a wide range. He was not copying what other people were doing. So by the end of the evening, it was just like the place was abuzz. You know, it was like, can you believe what you just saw? And I couldn't wait to run to the typewriter and sit down and write.
That one night and that one review saved me a year's work. I mean, there was no internet to spread it, but it flew, word of mouth.
Overnight, Elton had gone from the Last Chance Saloon to the talk of the town.
It was so exciting for us. We could see in the audience these people. Steve Stills was there. Some of the Three Dog Night guys were there. I think even Diana Ross was there.
Hey, Leon, everybody see this?
Also in the crowd was the songwriter and piano man of the times that Elton admired the most.
The second night at the Troubadour, I was halfway through Burn Down the Mission, and then I saw Leon in the second row, in the long grey hair and the aviator glasses, and I practically froze, because he was, at that particular time in my life, he was my idol, without question.
Leon Russell was a cult figure on the American music scene, a sought-after session man and songwriter.
I was petrified meeting him afterwards because I thought he was going to tie me to a chair and say, listen, this is how to play. And then, of course, he embraced me and was very complimentary.
He was quite a beautiful soul singer, had a huge blues awareness that I found interesting. I thought my career was over because he was a lot more active and a lot more showmanship. So I figured I'd had it.
That's what I was getting in those early shows at the Troubadour, was people, you know, musicians that I respected coming up to me and saying, this is really great. So I knew I was doing the right thing. And you know, my music at that point was more American anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, a few months ago, a young man came over from England, and he shot right to the top of the pop music field. His first album is a hit, his first single is a hit, and I hate it. No, I really like it. I mean, I really like him.
Elton didn't have to fight his way into those charts. He just exploded into the charts. I mean, there was a door waiting for him, you know? The 60s were winding down, and you didn't know what the 70s were going to be, you know? The Beatles are breaking up, right? Was rock and roll over? Where was it going to go?
It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside. I'm not one of those who can easily hide. I don't have much money, but
Your song was just one of those songs that came out at a time when people were reaching for something that felt real, and your song was such a sweet song. It was like expressing love with the inarticulateness of young people.
So excuse me for getting, but these things I do, you see, I've forgotten
if they're green or they're blue. Anyway, the thing is,
it was written out of pure innocence. I mean, when you listen to the lyric of that song, you can tell that it's written by somebody who's very naive and very young, and I was. I mean, you know, I was 17 years old, never been kissed. Well, I don't know about that, but pretty much.
And you can tell everybody this is your song.
With Your Song, Elton and Bernie finally found their voice, and back home it became their first top 10 hit.
Elton John, a remarkable man from the world of pop, whom some would claim to be Britain's newest musical superstar.
The boys who'd shared a room and a dream of becoming famous songwriters returned home men, where they were now being compared to their heroes.
Songs like 60 Years On are prompting American as well as British critics to suggest that Elton John and his partner Bernie Taupin could well be the most inventive and original team of songwriters since Lennon and McCartney.
How wonderful life is while you're in the world.
Elton, once the shy and retiring songwriter, now had a new air of confidence.
When it happened all so fast, and I was so surprised myself at how he suddenly took off and became this other person.
I happened to be, it must have been about 1970, 71, and I was watching TV, and they introduced him as Mr. Elton John, and I didn't take it, and then I peered at the television set, and I thought, that's not Elton John, that's Reg Dwight.
Baby, let me step for that thing. Wow, that's your boy. Why don't you ring my baby? Let me.
There was now little of the old Reg Dwight on show, and Elton's stage presence had also grown.
I always say I was a bit like the Jimi Hendrix of the piano because I had freedom. I could do exactly what I wanted. I couldn't, you know, throw it up in the air, catch it, play it behind my back, but I could certainly fly on it and do handstands on it.
And he loved all that early success, you know, and it was just so much more fun, you know, and he was having a good time and he was making a few bob. And, you know, there's nothing like a bit of success, is there? You know? So it's a pretty good drug.
When he became Elton John, he was rebelling against everything he wasn't allowed to do as a child, you know. So it was like he was escaping this repression that was forced upon him when he was younger.
By this time he had come out, not publicly, but to himself, so that made him more comfortable in his own skin. And by this time he had met John Reid, and they were like a pretty formidable team. You know, they were out to conquer the world.
John Reid, a precocious young record label exec, became Elton's partner and manager through the most prolific period of his career. Alongside constant touring, Elton would release 7 albums in the next 3 years.
I look back on it now and I think it's a lot of young adrenaline, and you only have that adrenaline for a certain part of your career. But the most important thing was that we had to do under contract 2 records a year.
The follow-up to the Elton John LP was already finished and ready to release. Tumbleweed Connection, born out of Elton and Bernie's shared love for all things American, seemed perfect for their new audience stateside.
I don't know if we knew when we started doing the Tumbleweed album that it was going to be such a conceptualized Americana piece. You know, that album was recorded before we even went to the States.
Bernie's inspiration for this ode to America came from a childhood spent dreaming of the Promised Land, a world of wide-open spaces and saloon bar shootouts.
someone who was destined to become American. Even though he lived in Ownby by Spittal in Lincolnshire. From the day I met him, he was obsessed with Americana, the Wild West, Marty Robbins, and to be honest with you, he's never changed.
Bernie's lyrics were straight out of the Wild West and were complemented by Elton's bluesy southern rock style.
The music was so different. It was a combination. He locked into that southern thing, and the rock thing, the soul thing, but he put his own unique take on all of that music.
Gospel and soul and country, basically that's my favorite kind of music, or American music that embraces all those three kind of, like Elvis Presley did in a way. He came from R&B, gospel and country. You fuse those together and you've got a pretty soulful combination.
Yes, it is. Got the comfort and that truck is going back home. Yes, it is. Got the comfort and that truck is going back home.
If Tumbleweed Connection was their American dream, the next album became a document of their new reality as Elton and his band took to the road.
The next song is about traveling in America. Bustin' at last, and the plane's touching down. Our hostess is handing.
Being on the road was wonderful. He was very well received wherever city we went to. The press were really smitten with Elton John. So it was a very, very happy time.
It's a 10-minute ride to the Holiday Inn. Boredom's a pastime that one soon acquired. Where you get to the stage where you're not even tired.
We were always in the studio or on the road, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
When we were coming over and doing these tours, I was always regarded as part of the band, only I just didn't perform. I was just a hanger-on, man. I don't know. I was sort of a groupie, I guess.
Slow down, Joe. I'm a rock and roll man.
It was such a whirlwind that I just don't remember ever having time to sort of breathe, and it was just an extraordinary time.
Elton became part of a scene that found him rubbing shoulders with many of his rock and roll heroes.
You'd go to a party on the Sunset Strip, and I go into the party, and it's Bob Dylan sitting on the piano. You know, all the English bands were coming into town, so it was, there's just energy.
My second trip, Bernie and I went with Danny Hutton to meet Brian Wilson. So you can imagine, I mean, we met Dylan at the Fillmore East, and he went, I really like that song, Ballad of a Well-Known Gun, and we was like, we couldn't hardly speak. I mean, you have to realize that I was meeting within a period of 2 months some of the greatest names in the world, and it was joyous.
Ever the fan, Elton was in his element, and new friends also brought his first taste of the decadent rock star lifestyle.
I became friends with Danny Hutton, who was in Three Dog Night, and I went up to his house in Laurel Canyon with his girlfriend, June, and had dinner with him and Van Dyke Parks.
This is the craziest party that could ever be.
Like a little funky Laurel Canyon house with a great vibe. And Elton played piano all night.
I left at 7:30 in the morning, and I thought, I've never stayed up till 7:30 in the morning. I was like, I feel really good, and I drove back to the Sunset Hyatt house in my rented car. And years later, Danny said, well, we put cocaine in your food, that's why.
We all indulged, and he was just part of indulging with us. I might have forgot to tell him. It was a freewheeling, wonderful time, you know, and I think it certainly didn't hurt him. He went on to be quite successful.
We moved on 6 miles.
Despite Elton making new friends in high places, his true companion remained by his side, taking everything in as they toured the States.
Well, I think Elton was a lot more ambitious than I was. I think I was just riding, you know, along on the back of the saddle. I was definitely the tonto, you know.
He may have felt like the sidekick, but new experiences fueled Bernie's writing, ensuring a healthy flow of lyrics for Elton to turn into songs.
The songwriting thing's very 50-50. I mean, yeah, he's the artist, but you have to remember he's singing my thoughts.
You know, I love getting the lyrics from Bernie. I love seeing what he comes up with. I love going into the room and creating something musical to his imagination. I've never gotten tired of that.
And I just sift through them. There's one here that I've sort of done the other day called Tiny Dancer, which is about Bernie's girlfriend. You look at it, the words, blue jean baby, LA lady, seamstress of the band, pretty-eyed pirate smile, you marry a music man, ballerina. As soon as you get to the word ballerina, you know it's not going to be fast. It's got to be sort of gentle and slow, and sort of quite slow.
They were so different in terms of a songwriting partnership, because they never actually sat down together. Like, you know, Lennon and McCartney sat down around a piano or guitar and you know, worked stuff out together.
Extraordinary. I mean, when you think about it, when we've been together for 43 years now, Bernie and I, and still haven't written a song in the same room.
Blue jean baby, LA lady, seamstress for the band.
I think there was a substance to him. He was a terrific songwriter, I think. And then Elton could take that music and take that song and put it together in a way that just made it, you know, seem irresistible.
Ballerina, you must have seen her dancing in the sand.
We've never had an argument over a song, and that's to his credit, because there must have been instances where I've written melodies to his song that didn't go. I don't tread on his toes, and he doesn't tread on mine. And it's a matter of trust and love, the love we have for each other and the respect. And you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Hold me closer, tiny dancer. Count the headlights on the highway. Lay me down in sheets of linen. You had a busy day today. Oh.
Elton and Bernie had mastered the art of the rock ballad, but in late 1971, there weren't many sensitive singer-songwriters on top of the pops.
Here is the only group to have 2 #1s last year. You saw them singing on Christmas Day, and here's the other one, T-Rex, and Get It On.
While Elton was across the water, back in the UK, Mark Bolan had paved the way for a new kind of garish, glittering glam rock. And Elton had his own glam side just itching to get out.
After Tumbleweed and Madman, we went in a whole different direction, you know, and suddenly overnight we went from being these American FM darlings of kind of folk rock suddenly morphed into this other character. Elton basically became a pop star.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh no, 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 I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse out of every home.
Rocket Man was the first big single, I mean a pop single. Because up to then I'd had Your Song, and Leaving on Tiny Dancer weren't big hits at all. So yeah, that changed everything.
Oh no, no, no,
He loved it. He loved it. He had money to spend. You see his wardrobe started to become more, embellished, So, oh no, he took it all in his stride. This is what he'd wanted. He'd always wanted to be a star.
He went from here to here very quickly, but he became very flamboyant also. I mean, all of a sudden became this wild, crazy character. I think that's what really took him to the superstar area.
I remember when rock was young. Me and Susie had so much fun. Holding hands and skimming stones. Had an old gold Chevy and a place of my own.
I thought he suddenly jumped out of his skin and became a giant sort of show business character. He was larger than life. And some of the clothes he wore were unbelievably funny. This is probably the most outlandish one.
I felt that I could have carte blanche to do what I want, and I did. I took Legs Larry Smith on tours. Larry would come and tap dance wearing a crash helmet with a wedding couple on, and then we'd use midgets. We had a band of midgets dancing with us, and we did all sorts of potty things. People would come and think, well, what's he going to do now?
Elton was having fun. The fancy dress and rock and roll pastiche of Crocodile Rock were a far cry from the sombre songwriter he appeared to be back in '69. And it wasn't to everyone's taste.
I shook my head and rolled my eyes and thought, okay, I don't know if I thought maybe he'll grow out of this, he'll move on. Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, you don't sing your song in a Donald Duck outfit in Central Park. It's beyond awful. But nobody was really going to tell him no at the time.
People say you shouldn't wear clothes. If you sing something like your song, you shouldn't wear something like that. It's like, oh, fuck off, why not? And I think then you become a law unto yourself and you say, oh, there's nothing I can't do or can't get away with.
When he took off, it was at the same time that the music business as a whole was taking off. It was just like a kind of rocket. It was going whoosh. Everything was getting bigger. More and more money was being made by everybody. And nothing was denied you.
By this time, Elton had become Elton, spend a lot. So everything backstage was always, palm trees and God knows what else, like lavish.
Hey kids, shake and loose together. Spotlight in something that we know to change the weather.
We had this one private plane. It's called the Starship. It had a sitting room with a fireplace in it, and it had a bar on it with an organ. Elizabeth Taylor was on there one time. Elton was in the back, resting.
That's him in his bedroom on the plane. I mean, see how big the bed is. I mean, it took, the whole back of the plane.
And somebody started playing the organ, and he shouts out, "Shut that racket up." And he came out, and it was Stevie Wonder playing the organ on our jet. It's just insane.
If you talk about the sort of private planes and the touring parties and everybody having their own limousine and everybody having their own security, and yeah, we did all that, but undoubtedly at some point you're going to go, where do you go from here? I mean, where do you go from here?
In the space of 4 frenetic years, he has come from total obscurity to 3 Rolls Royces in the garage of a house named Hercules. 4 years, 6 million records, and then they stopped counting. 4 years of moving relentlessly across the never-never land of sudden wealth, instant failure on a train that never stops except to throw people off.
At the height of his powers, every night was Saturday night for Elton, and there was no let up from the relentless live shows.
Right, I want all you to sing along with me, come on. Saturday, 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 Saturday.
Problems do come later on when you've had a bit of success for a long while, and then all of a sudden you get used and you get tired, and because it's a bit of a treadmill.
I want you to sing it really loudly. There's 88,000 of you. You'll make much noise than we can on stage. Come on now. Now for 4. 1, 2, 3.
There was a price. The price, although I had a house and I bought art, I learned about art. I mean, God knows when I slept, but it didn't take a toll at all until I started maybe dabbling with drugs. And I didn't really start dabbling with drugs seriously until 73, 74.
The cocaine crept in. I was quite surprised at how quickly it came to be a part of the landscape.
When you become that big, that fast, you stop listening to criticism, and you stop listening to the people who may have been around you at the beginning who could tell it to you straight. And that's when you start to lose your friends.
In April 1975, Elton sacked the bassist and drummer who had backed him since the beginning.
It was a rage of egomania. Elton has come to believe his press clippings. He's convinced he's the most powerful and almighty performer in the history of rock. He feels he doesn't need anybody.
A few months later, complete with new band, Elton returned to play the city that made him a star and received the full Hollywood welcome.
I now want to present a proclamation which declares this week Elton John Week.
The venue he'd sold out for 2 nights that week was a far cry from the cosy Troubadour Club he'd played 5 years earlier.
John Reid told me, I've got to get over to LA to shoot this gig because it's the biggest outdoor gig ever.
The first time that they'd reopened Dodger Stadium to be used for rock concerts since 1966, when they'd shut it down at a Beatles concert. So this is a historic event for the city of Los Angeles, you know. I mean, everybody you can think of just showed up. You know, Cary Grant's walking around backstage, you know, with his grandson. It's like, wow. Every celebrity under the sun was there. It was like, this is just off the charts.
There was a carnival atmosphere in the Elton camp. The star himself was putting on a brave face, but underneath, his personal life and particularly his relationship with his manager and partner John Reid was in turmoil.
It's very hard to maintain a lifestyle where you travel so much, where you're away from people so much. You take hostages, you take them on the road with you, and then they hate you, and they, you know, it all ends in tears. And any relationship that you bring drugs and drink into, or drugs especially, is doomed to failure.
There was media coming around and wanting to do interviews with him, and cameras and fans lined up, and it was a trailer, and when he went there by himself and sat in that trailer, and rather than talk to people and shake hands with people and all that kind of stuff. I thought he was handling it all really well, but beneath that, you didn't realize kind of the darker side of what was happening.
You run away with this thing and you enjoy, life. I don't stop touring, I don't make a record. But then at the end of the day, what have you got in your life? You go home to an empty house. You go home and then you're in an empty house, so you get a lot of people down, you do drugs, and is that fun? Not after a while, it isn't, no.
The night before the show, as his family and friends were gathered at his LA home, Elton attempted suicide, taking an overdose of pills.
We didn't know. We were up all night. I mean, everybody. It was a very emotional time, and his mum and his grandma was over there at the time. He brought them over to see this gig, and that was a touch and go time,
He never showed it on stage. That expression, the show must go on, he got on stage, you would never have known he was depressed or anything. He was a wonderful performer.
Shoot down your plane. It'll take you a couple of tequila sunrises to set you on your feet again. You know you came home for
parallel highs and lows of 1975 marked the end of an era for the 28-year-old Elton. In just 5 years, he'd gone from shy and retiring Reg to the Rocket Man, the biggest pop star in the world. Elton would never quite match the creative streak of those first 5 years, but he and Bernie could still write a hit. 1976 brought them their first ever UK number one.
I'm certainly proud of our back catalogue. We made a lot of crap too. You know, there are things that I find that are sort of fluff in our canon, you know, I mean, things like Don't Go Breaking My Heart. But they all served a purpose at the time. But do I sit around listening to them? No.
I think at that time he did lose sight of his own talent and his own energy, because the energy was fueled by drugs, and it's a different energy. It's not your energy anymore, it's a substance energy.
I took a lot of coke and I still worked. I didn't stay at home taking a lot of coke. I still went out there and played and made records. I wasn't on drugs all the time, but there were certainly records that I made where I was on drugs, and I wrote on drugs. And you tend to think what you've written is much better than it actually is.
The hits were more occasional now, but the go-getting 80s suited Elton's new image as a survivor. In 1984, Elton took his team, Watford FC, to the Cup final and surprised many by getting married to Renate Blauer, a German sound engineer he'd met the previous year. Having come out as bisexual in the 70s, Elton was no stranger to speculation about his sexuality, and by 1987 he became the tabloid's #1 target.
I mean, he went through a lot of upheavals with the tabloids. It got very unpleasant.
Elton sued The Sun and cleared his name, but had yet to win the battle with his own demons.
You could see the road that he was on, and I could see it. His mood swings were pretty drastic. He went very Judy Garland on us.
Goodbye, Norma Jean, though I never knew you at all. I've had the rest to hold yourself.
I was very confused, pretty down on drugs, and you know, you can't think straight when you're doing that amount of drugs. There's got to be a balance. When I, became an addict and an alcoholic, and I went to rehab, blah blah blah. One of the things that was pointed out is that my whole life was Elton John. There was no other person in it.
Seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to cling to when the rain set in.
When I met David 3 years after I got sober, when I was 46, I was ready to have a relationship. And I wasn't looking for it, but I was ready to have a relationship. And I was grown up then. I didn't grow up till I was 43.
Sober and settled with his new partner, Elton explored new avenues as a musician and ways to put his celebrity to good use.
Whether selling off part of his extravagant wardrobe or singing before invited and extremely rich guests, Sir Elton's AIDS Foundation has raised £25 million since it was set up a decade ago.
Elton's dramatic journey, played out in the eye of the British public, left him strangely qualified for the role of the nation's agony aunt in 1997.
Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You were the grace that placed.
Candle in the Wind seemed the perfect epitaph for Diana, but written in 1973 about Marilyn Monroe, an icon, hounded by the press, a life cut short in its prime, its story could easily also have been Elton's. Instead, as the soundtrack to England's tears, it completed his redemption. Sir Elton, a national treasure.
And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to cling to when the rain set in. And I would have liked to know you, but I was just
know, I've made a lot of records in my time, and the last 3 records I made have all been really, really good records. But they've always been with the same band. They've been my band. So they've all sounded fairly similar. And I thought, I've got to approach making records differently. I've got to make a record when I want to make a record and not just for the sake of it. And when I make a record, I want it to sound different.
I've been so many places in my life and time.
Last year, a voice from his past inspired Elton's new musical direction.
David's playing Leon Russell on the iPod, and I'm getting ready for lunch, and I came in and I'm crying, sobbing, and he said, "What on earth is the matter with you?" And I said, "This just takes me back to the most wonderful period of my life." I don't know what it was, whether I suddenly had a touch of mortality ringing in my ears, I don't know. But it brought back so many great memories, and I said, you know, to go forward in my career as a recording artist, I've got to go back. I've got to revisit what I did.
Having lost contact soon after they first met, Elton tracked down Leon to make him an offer.
And he called up and said, let's just do a duet album together and write some songs for that. And I said, what kind of songs do you want me to write? And he said, up-tempo, baby.
Elton then drafted in the first choice producer for any band in search of an authentic American sound.
I thought, well, we'll probably do something like Tumbleweed Connection because, you know, that's something I can relate to and he can relate to and Bernie Taupin could relate to and Leon could relate to. You know, it was a touchstone for all of us. But it ended up being a, you know, flat-out gospel record.
I went out to the piano and started writing a song, and Leon came out and started playing with me. So that's the first time we actually played together. And everyone's face lit up. We knew this was going to work. The combination of the 2 pianos and his voice and mine, it was fantastic.
It's a constant struggle getting up there.
And what of Elton's search for his roots, for his own true spirit as a musician beyond his celebrity status?
He wanted to reconnect with Leon, and he wanted to reconnect, and I think he wanted to reconnect with that part of himself. I think this record's probably closer to him than anything he's ever done. He's not putting on any fine jackets, and he's not putting on any flashy glasses, you know.
It's stripping it of all the trinkets and trappings that have tampered with our musical heritage in the past, you know, and I think he's come full circle. Hallelujah.
In reuniting with Leon Russell, Elton has also reached out to the man he was when they first met in 1970. Before the hits, before the money, the drugs and the fame. And who knows where music will take him next.
I really like that.
Amen and amen.
What keeps me going is also the unknown. The unknown that comes into your life, that changes your life. Like the Liberty Records thing with Bernie's lyrics. Like going to the Troubadour. Like David putting Leon on his iPod. The wonderful little surprises you get from life. You know, there's always something great around the corner. And without music, my life would be nothing. It's given me everything in my life. It's nearly taken away everything as well, but it's given me everything.